Hey, welcome back. We're at the second day of the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference, and I have Mike Sawyer, who is the Vice President of Strategy, and probably even more, because we were talking before we went on, and he's way above my pay grade as far as knowledge in this business. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and Mike, tell us the name of the company, what you do, and why you do it, and how you relate the cannabis industry to the healthcare industry, which I found very interesting because, as you know, besides Cannabis News Florida, our other product is South Florida Hospital News and Healthcare Reports. So it's kind of like a marriage going on here between us, which we didn't even know.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mike.
Thanks
so tell us a little bit about the company and what you do.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. So Forian is a healthcare data analytics company at its heart. This time last year, we acquired BioTrack, which is one of the leading point of sale and track and trace providers. Currently, we operate 10 track and trace and patient registries and have a commercial ERP with over 1,200 customers.
So you have data throughout the, not just in Florida now, but other parts of the country.
Yeah, other states, and then on top of our commercial solution, we have close to 12 to 1,500 customers, ranging from retailers, cultivators, manufacturers.
Wow.
So Forian, again, operating BioTrack, we have three prongs of our business. We have the track and trace business with BioTrack, which I just mentioned with our 10 contracts. We have our commercial solution, which is a full suite ERP. And then our third prong is our data factory. And that's our real differentiator in this space. So that data factory is at the intersection of cannabis and traditional healthcare. So we have a proprietary data asset that covers over 300 million Americans, tracking them longitudinally, their healthcare claims, pharmaceutical claims, then we marry that with a consumer database.
Now you're getting that information from where?
So we get that from our data providers. So we have certain contracts with various vendors in the healthcare space where we've accumulated these data feeds. So we get this data in real time and it's updated weekly. So we get over 65% of every pharmaceutical transaction. We get over 65% of every EMR transaction in the U.S., covering over 300 million Americans, tracked in real time. So the thesis behind Forian was, in these emerging therapies, whether it be cannabis, psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, we need to prove the safety and efficacy from the standpoint of, are these working, what are they working for, and also how can we get physicians and the healthcare and payers more comfortable with these emerging therapies so they can treat it as a traditional ethical pharmaceutical. And you're seeing some of that progress being made specifically in New Mexico right now. So the goal...
Tell us about New Mexico.
Yeah, so New Mexico, we have the track and trace contract there for medical and research.
How long have you had that?
We've had the contract for over 3 to 4 years on the medical side.
Great.
The REC we just won, so REC obviously just launched a few weeks ago. So it's been a tremendous success. But New Mexico is unique in that one of the major players in New Mexico, Ultra, which is probably the dominant player there, has been at the forefront of wanting cannabis to be treated as an ethical pharmaceutical in terms of how it's covered by payers, right? So not payers being able to step in and have the ability to cover that as a traditional ethical pharmaceutical, so they're not having to come out of pocket.
So it's like a copay.
Exactly.
Right.
So ultimately, we see ourselves as being a partner in that progress. Again, to take the anecdotal and make it empirical with our data, whether it be real-world evidence, clinical studies, patient-reported outcome. So we can have enough of a bolus of data to take to the payers, to take to the insurance providers to say, this does work and for what disease states and under what conditions, right? So outside of just strictly the naming conventions of sativa, indica, and hybrid, what cannabinoid ratios, what terpenes, within what standard deviation equates to what therapeutic effects for what specific disease states.
Getting more into the scientific part of it rather than just going out and buying it on the street.
Exactly.
You're now monitoring through a lab what's in it to be able to make it almost like a prescription per se.
Yeah, so the good thing about the cannabis industry, right, is from a compliance standpoint, it's one of the most regulated industries in the world. So
more so than even opioids.
Yeah, exactly. So each product has to get tested, right? So we have the luxury of we see the COAs, we see the lab testing data, so we're able to marry all that data, and we're seeing who's buying it. And again, we layer in the healthcare data. So as opposed to anecdotal stories, we can see, hey, they started medical cannabis in December. At that time, they were on a prescription for opiate and they were going to the doctor twice a month. Over the course of a year, their prescriptions fell off and they stopped going to the doctor. It changed from twice a month to once every 3 months. So instead of anecdotally, yes, this helped, we can see actually how it helped and what financial impact that happened on the person and on the payer.
How is that impacting HIPAA data?
So our entire database is HIPAA compliant. So we built the data factory from the standpoint of HIPAA compliance from the start. So our senior leadership and our co-founders come from pharma and life sciences. So our two co-founders, prior to starting More Analytics with myself, they were running WebMD until they sold to KKR. So immense experience across healthcare, life sciences, and disparate data sets to derive insights. And a big piece of where we see ourselves, and tying back to our founder's background, is physician education. So within WebMD,
paramount in cannabis.
Yes.
Paramount in cannabis.
So behind WebMD was Medscape, which is the largest physician education platform. So we see ourselves playing a role in that end, where in cannabis, there's a huge need for physician education, so they can understand, because they're getting asked these questions, right, by their patients, and if they don't have a good response, you're leaving the person to the opportunity to try something, and they could have a bad experience.
Well, their experience is based on conversations with their patients, conversations with other physicians, but not scientific, dealing with thousands, dealing with maybe 20 or 30 different people.
Exactly, but also how does cannabis interact with other traditional ethical pharmaceuticals? What concomitant therapies work, right? Because if you're on cannabis and you're on a blood thinner, and if that has an adverse reaction, right? We want to know that. Physicians want to know that. So if their patient is saying, I'm inclined to try cannabis, well, hey, as a precursor, you're on these medications that don't interact that well with this specific product or this specific form factor. So again, you're clearing up the ambiguity of what works for what, who's the right person, and then again, factoring in other pharmaceuticals that people are on, how do they interact to put the people in the best position to get the desired therapeutic effects they want, but also have a good experience.
Right. So two questions. One, how does a physician, and I'll talk about the state of Florida because that's kind of what my business is about. How does a physician tap into your information? What is it going to take for them to understand that information to help their patients?
So we're at the early stages of that, right? So we need to drive real world evidence studies. We need to drive a lot of this research so we can have reports, data to take to these physicians to start breaking down the barriers to get them more comfortable with these products, with these various form factors, and as it relates to the conditions that they treat. So we're in the early stages of that, again, with a lot of the movement at the federal level, clearing up the research ambiguity, clearing up the ability for physicians to talk about these products with their patients. We're having tremendous momentum on that front, but again, we're at early stages there, and we've only had the BioTrack asset for a year, so there's a tremendous amount of data cleansing and normalizing that we had to do, but now we're at the point where we're being much more aggressive on the research forefront.
So you're able to take their data and integrate it into your database and kind of match them together and come out with some solutions or just more questions.
More insights, more questions. But and I think everybody within the cannabis industry will know that. But the cannabis industry data, is not exactly the cleanest. So it's a big effort for us to normalize that data, to clean it, to make it actionable. Because the bad data in is bad insights out. So
absolutely.
You need that. It all starts from how the integrity of the data to start. So we took the last year investing tremendously in our software, but also cleaning up the data, getting it ready for the data factory to take out to our various customers.
You're the tracking mechanism, for instance, that BioTrack has in the state of Florida, you're able to take that data, marry it with your healthcare data, and put it all together to come out with some good results.
Yeah, so we can, and we talk with state regulators frequently about this, but they want to know adverse events, right? So we can take that, and we have conversations at the state level for this, but say, what diseases are they using this for? How many adverse events? Where can we pinpoint? How can we drive? How can we make our program more efficient? So Florida specifically, the largest medical market, right?
Right.
Once that track and trace is in place and we have a year's worth of data, right? Then there's interesting stuff we can do with the regulators to answer questions that are privy to them, right?
Right.
What qualifying conditions make sense? What don't? Where are we seeing the most progress? Where are we seeing the most overrepresentation from a disease state versus cannabis and so on?
And I know, because that's part of what we do is we interface with physicians and patients. And one thing you find is that in the state of Florida, the legislative people are stubborn as far as different diseases and different situations to be able to use cannabis. And a lot of it is like-kind, kind of like like-kind. How do you break through that barrier with the state data? Are you able to capture and go deeper? Somebody, for instance, this state won't recognize sickle cell in the state of Florida. Now, you can get to the point in time of pain and anxiety and get there, but and I'm sure it would qualify, but they're so stubborn they won't get that in there. Do you think your information is going to help them cross that bridge to be able to start including things that should have been there almost from the beginning?
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely part of the puzzle, but again, it all starts from the research side, right? So I think Pennsylvania has done it really well via their clinical registrant program, right? Mm-hmm. That is driving real research, real clinical studies into actually sickle cell is one of the operators. I know they're going down that path. So yes, we can, but it's also a question of what do they prioritize, right? I know there's a lot of questions in various states about putting potency limits. So
the state of Florida is one of them now.
So I've actually had conversations with various regulators on that and saying, we're Switzerland from that perspective. If you truly believe that there needs to be potency because there's adverse events, let us do studies to prove that out.
Before you make any changes.
But at the same time, we will do those studies, but if it says potency limits don't really make sense and you're doing this for the wrong reasons, we will also prove that out. So again, we view ourselves from the analytics side as Switzerland, right?
Right.
Whatever the data says,
right.
And we're not influencing that because ultimately, my view is cannabis is a tremendous plant and has tremendous applications for various disease states, and to be working by itself or concomitant with other traditional ethical pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, we have found in the state of Florida, as you know, the OMMU, which controls, and that's who you have a contract with, the OMMU, they have toyed around with changing limitations. And when you ask why, you don't get a why.
So they scrapped that. They did scrap that.
They did scrap that, but it was scary for doctors and patients.
Well, because the people who need those higher potencies, right, for whatever whatever they're dealing with, if you lower that potency, it means they have to buy more to get to the same threshold.
And where are they going to buy it from?
And again, if the payers don't step in and cover such stuff, you're going to bankrupt people just by providing them the medicine they need to function, right? So that's kind of going back to the ethos and the thesis behind the companies. We want to be an ally and a partner to prove out that these work and that you shouldn't be punished or put in a different position to come out of pocket just because your therapy that works best for you isn't recognized by the people who essentially can subsidize.
Do you have, and again, you don't need to answer this question, but do you have any influence today in speaking with them based on what you've done in other states?
So I would say influence.
You don't have to answer it.
I would say,
at least a conversation.
I would say we can have those conversations, right?
Okay.
And we can talk towards, again, our data asset, what we can do, what initiatives we can work together on, but also things we've seen in other states and other markets.
Exactly, right.
And again, tying back to our co-founder's background in life sciences, interest in pharmaceuticals, the stuff they've worked on previously.
Yeah, I have seen, they keep on, everyone takes a look. It's interesting. People look at other states. They don't look what happened in those other states. They just look at the other states. They look at the result rather than the information coming in like you're trying to provide. Well, that result in that state is a different population than the population down here. So to me, you deal with the data of the population that you're dealing with, not the population. In other words, the population of Florida is going to be different than the population of Alaska.
Exactly, and that goes back to our data asset covering so many Americans, and this isn't relying on them telling us what diseases or what prescriptions they're taking. We have that in real time. That is really the drugs they're taking. That's how frequently they fill those prescriptions. That's how frequently they're seeing the physician. That's what they're diagnosed with. So again, we're taking out any influence, and it's just, again, all completely data-driven. So wherever the data insights takes us, those are the conclusions that'll be derived.
Well, what I'd like to do, because this is fascinating, because I deal with a group of physicians, an organized group of medical marijuana physicians who are some, not they don't care, some are not proactive. Every one of the 100 that I deal with is very, very proactive. Love to have you come on to one of our meetings.
Yeah.
It's a Zoom meeting to discuss it and to see the benefits of working with you for themselves and for the patients and for pricing a product.
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic. It's actually funny because, as I've been in the cannabis industry for about 6 years now, and as family members and family friends who are physicians, now they call me about dosing recommendations, what products to work, does CBD work for this? So, frankly, I think I know a good amount about cannabis, but
unfortunately, they call me for the same thing. Yeah, I don't really know.
I wouldn't want me giving you treatment guidance. To be honest. So that again goes back to where we really feel like we can play an integral part in the evolution of this industry, because it is still early.
It is. It's early, but you find there are so many people that depend on it. I mean, this is their life. I mean, this is, when you start taking away or reducing the amount that I could buy, that would be like saying, well, you take blood pressure medicine, but for no particular reason, the legislature is going to say, you can't take it every day. You got to take it every other day. Well, what's that going to do to me?
Yeah.
And they don't use any science. I have yet to see a legislative person use any scientific data to do anything.
They're going off of the scare stories.
Right, exactly. The one, they go off of what I would call the 95-5 percentage. They rely on the 5% because it makes the news rather than the 95% that are saving people's lives.
Exactly, and going back to data, bad information leads to bad results. So
and bad actors in the space.
Yes,
that's the other part of it. You have bad actors not using good data to be able to make this happen.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties back to what happened on the vape crisis, right? And, that adding those additional additives to the vape to cut it down, to have from a price perspective, have more bang for your buck. But look what that led to, right? Weeding out those bad actors to keep the industry progressing and to keep, to change, the perception has changed dramatically, but to continue on that track.
But it's regulation too. If you don't regulate a product, what do you expect to have to it? So.
Exactly. So, I think leading the charge on more in-depth testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, because each state has different testing requirements, right? Well, from a data perspective, I would love to see uniformity around that they're testing the same way, so it can be apples to apples, but also they're doing a full prong testing. They're testing for all the cannabinoids, all the terpenes, right? All the flavonoids, everything that equates to the entourage effect of what works and how your body interacts with it, as opposed to I'm just going off of this just because the state mandates that we just test for THC.
Right.
But THC is only part of the story, right?
A small part of the story, as a matter of fact. So.
Yeah, so I would love to kind of get on talk with the physicians and continue this.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you stopping by today. We will have more conversations.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Because you are an integral part, especially in the state of Florida, and what you're doing now in better controlling the cannabis space. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for the time. Enjoyed it.
And we will be back in about another hour. Thank you.